Hello, world travelers. I am Grayson Jack, your host for today's road trip through a part of the Bridgewater Township, located in Somerset County in central New Jersey. If you did not know already, Bridgewater is a town of immense importance in shaping American history, and today, as we drive through some of Bridgewater's most scenic routes, I will tell you why that is the case. Before I begin doing so, let me tell you where we are and where we are going. We are headed north, driving across the first Watchung Mountain. There are many routes across this mountain, and we chose the route starting at the bottom of Mine Road, a road which was named for the historic copper mines that once operated in the Watchung Mountains. We are now driving on Crim Road. Crim Road, which rises about 300 feet from the bottom of Mine Road, will take us across the rest of the first Watchung Mountain, where at its northern end intersects with Washington Valley Road, a road that lies between the first and second Watchung Mountains. From there, we will turn right onto Washington Valley Road and head east to Vossler Avenue, which will take us back over to the southern side of the first Watchung Mountain. While they're called mountains, the Watchungs are actually the remnants of ancient lava flows. Roughly 200 million years ago, as Pangaea began to tear apart, the Earth's crust cracked and flooded this region with molten basalt. Over time, these massive volcanic sheets were tilted and buried. Because basalt is so hard, it resisted erosion while the surrounding softer rock washed away, leaving the exposed ridges we see today. At their highest points, these ridges are only about 400 to 700 feet above sea level. The Lenape Nation, the indigenous people who colonized that region, called them the Watchungs, meaning high hills, a vantage point used for centuries to track movement across the plains. Today, when you stand on these ridges, you're standing on the frozen edge of a volcanic eruption that helped birth the Atlantic Ocean. This drive through the Watchungs takes you through very scenic parts of Bridgewater Township. Bridgewater, named after the town of Bridgewater in Somerset, England, is a township that was created on April 4, 1749, by a royal charter granted by King George II of Great Britain. The charter officially defined a 75 to 80 square mile area which was previously purchased from the Lenape Nation. In 1798, under the Township Act, Bridgewater Township was officially recognized as one of New Jersey's initial group of 104 townships. As time passed, during the 19th century, portions of the township were taken to form Warren Township in 1806, Branchburg Township in 1845, Somerville in 1863, Raritan in 1868, and Boundbrook in 1869. As a result, the size of Bridgewater Township was reduced to about 33 square miles in area. I started our road trip by telling you Bridgewater is a town of immense importance in shaping American history. Specifically, locations in the first Watchung Mountain were pivotal in America securing independence from Britain in 1783. At that time, almost all of those locations were part of Bridgewater Township. On our return trip back over the first Watchung Mountain via Vossler Avenue, we will pass very close to some of those locations. Since parts of Bridgewater Township were carved out to establish other municipalities in the 19th century, today some of those locations are now situated just outside Bridgewater. Before I continue, I want to clear up any confusion I might have caused. I just said that America secured independence from Britain in 1783 and not 1776. It is true that America celebrates July 4, 1776 as Independence Day. That is because it is the date the Second Continental Congress, which comprised delegates from the 13 British colonies, formally adopted the final draft of the Declaration of Independence. However, the War for Independence, referred to as the American War of Independence, the American Revolutionary War, and the Revolutionary War, actually began in 1775 and was officially won on September 3, 1783, with the Treaty of Paris. So while we celebrate July 4th as Independence Day, it only represents the nation's symbolic birthday. So why did America seek independence from Britain? Every American should know the answer to this question, but for any viewers who don't, here are the reasons why. Before the Revolutionary War, America wasn't one country. It was 13 separate British colonies hugging the Atlantic coast. Life was generally good for the British colonists, who saw themselves as proud British subjects, but this relationship soured after the British defeated the French in 1763 in the costly global war known as the 7 Years' War. Before that war, for many decades, Britain mostly left the 13 colonies alone, a policy called salutary neglect. However, to pay off massive war debts from the 7 Years' War, Britain began imposing new laws and taxes on the colonists without their prior consultation. The colonists at that time numbered about 2.5 million people, about one-third the size of Great Britain's population of about 8 million people. Therefore, much money could be made by taxing them. Because the colonists had no representatives in the British Parliament, they felt their rights were being ignored. This gave birth to the famous slogan, "No taxation without representation." The colonists were angry, and it wasn't just about money, it was about control. Britain, at the time ruled by King George III, was trampling their civil liberties, and this fueled the colonists' fight for self-governance. Colonists wanted the right to make their own laws rather than being ruled by a king 3,000 miles away. To do so, they would have to engage in a battle with the British Crown. And so they did. The first shots of the war occurred on April 19, 1775, at Lexington and Concord, towns located in Massachusetts, roughly 15 to 20 miles northwest of Boston. The colonists who engaged in this initial battle were made up of the local New England militias. But the leaders of the 13 colonies realized they needed a unified, professional force to fight a long-term war. Therefore, the Second Continental Congress appointed George Washington as Commander-in-Chief in June 1775 to unify regional militias and create the Continental Army. It is well recognized that Washington's greatest skill wasn't winning every battle, it was keeping his ragtag army together against the world's most powerful military. However, as the war began, Benjamin Franklin, a member of the Second Continental Congress, secured a vital alliance with France on February 6, 1778. France, following their humiliating defeat by Britain in the 7 Years' War that officially ended in 1763, was willing to join the colonists in their war against Britain after determining the colonists could actually win the war. Without French money, ships, and soldiers, the Americans likely would have lost. In March 1776, 1 year after the war began, General Washington successfully forced the British to leave Boston by placing heavy cannons on the heights overlooking the city. However, he knew the British Army would regroup and strike a more important target. Indeed, that is what they did. The British decided to capture New York City to gain control of the Hudson River. Their goal was to cut the colonies in half, separating the rebellious New England states from the more moderate middle and southern colonies. In response, Washington rushed his army from Boston to New York to defend it. The defense of New York went poorly. In late 1776, a massive British force defeated Washington at the Battle of Long Island. To save his army from total destruction, Washington fled across the Hudson River to adjacent New Jersey, where he and the Continental Army spent nearly half of the Revolutionary War, most notably in Middlebrook in parts of 1777 and from 1778 to 1779, and Morristown from 1779 to 1780. The Middlebrook encampments were located along the slopes of the first Watchung Mountain in Bridgewater Township. But as I told you earlier, following the Revolutionary War during the 19th century, parts of Bridgewater Township were carved out to establish other municipalities, and as a result, some of those historic Middlebrook encampments are now situated just outside Bridgewater. However, the primary Washington campground is still located within Bridgewater Township, just off Vossler Avenue on Middlebrook Road, close to where we are driving right now. Named after the Middlebrook, a tributary of the Raritan River, the Middlebrook encampments were chosen for their strategic position along the first Watchung Mountain Ridge. This elevated ground provided a natural fortress that allowed General Washington to monitor British troop movements in New Brunswick and Perth Amboy. Because of its strategic location, Washington and his army traversed New Jersey 4 times, spending more time in this state than any other. During this time, they fought the battles of Trenton in December 1776 and Princeton in January 1777, resulting in major victories. While the victories at Trenton and Princeton boosted morale, it was the time spent here at the Middlebrook encampment that truly professionalized the Continental Army. During the Second Encampment of 1778 to 1779, the troops emerged from the Watchung Mountains as a disciplined elite fighting force. This preparation led directly to the Battle of Monmouth, the longest one-day battle of the war, which proved the Americans could finally go toe-to-toe with the British in an open field. This stalemate forced the British to abandon the North and shift their strategy toward the southern colonies, eventually leading to their final surrender at Yorktown, Virginia in 1781. So what was Bridgewater's role in this triumph? It was the shield of the Revolution. By using the first Watchung Mountain as a natural fortress, Washington kept the British pinned down in New York while protecting the Continental Congress in Philadelphia. Without these high hills, Washington might never have survived long enough to see the victory at Yorktown. But Bridgewater's importance wasn't just tactical, it was symbolic. While the Army was camped here, the Second Continental Congress passed the Flag Resolution on June 14, 1777. Because Middlebrook was the primary camp at that moment, Bridgewater is famously recognized as the location where the first official 13-star American flag was unfurled. Today, the Washington Campground remains one of the few places in the country specifically authorized by Congress to fly that 13-star flag 24 hours a day to honor this historic moment. So there you have it, a recap of the major events that led to America's independence from Britain and the significant role that Bridgewater Township in New Jersey and its first Watchung Mountain played in it. I hope you enjoyed our drive today and will have a chance to visit Bridgewater and the Watchung Mountains. If you do, I might run into you since this is my home. Until our next trip, au revoir.